Inside the FBI's 2026 crackdown on a $400 million crypto laundering ring retention chalk point, zero hook dramatic opening moment. It started with a children's hospital. On the morning of February 11, 2021, staff at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio arrived at work to find their systems locked. Every patient record, every treatment protocol, every dosing schedule, encrypted and inaccessible. A ransom note appeared on screens throughout the building. The attackers demanded $2.3 million in Bitcoin. Until it was paid, the files would stay locked. Nurses reverted to handwritten medication logs. Surgeons rescheduled non-emergency procedures. For 31 hours, one of the largest pediatric medical centers in the United States operated as though it had been transported back 40 years in time. A 3-year-old recovering from cardiac surgery had her monitoring records manually tracked every 15 minutes by a nurse who refused to leave her bedside. Ransom was not paid, the FBI was called. What investigators found when they began pulling at that thread was something far larger than a single hospital attack. It was a financial architecture, a global machine purpose-built to take criminal proceeds from ransomware attacks on American infrastructure and turn them into clean, untraceable money. $400 million had moved through it over 4 years. And for most of those 4 years, the people running it believed they were untouchable. They were wrong. Retention point, 0. 30 hook resolution Ts. The investigation that followed took the FBI's cyber division 3 years to complete. It spanned 4 continents, involved 18 federal agencies, and ended in simultaneous arrests in the Republic of Georgia, Thailand, and Cyprus, all timed to the unsealing of a federal grand jury indictment in the Eastern District of Virginia. It recovered $74 million in digital assets, and it permanently changed how the Bureau approaches financially motivated cybercrime. This is the story of Operation Phantom Ledger. The landscape the FBI walked into in 2021 was not new territory, but it was moving fast. Since at least 2019, ransomware as a service operations had become the dominant model in financially motivated cybercrime targeting the United States. These are criminal enterprises that license malware to affiliate attackers and take a cut of every ransom. The attackers were not always technically sophisticated. What they needed was access to effective ransomware and access to money laundering, infrastructure capable of processing large volumes of cryptocurrency without triggering law enforcement attention. The ransomware operators provided the malware and the extortion infrastructure. A separate criminal ecosystem had developed to handle the money. These were the exchangers, the brokers, the over-the-counter desks. Unlicensed financial operations that would accept cryptocurrency from any source, no questions asked, and return value in a form that was harder to trace. Some operated through shell companies in jurisdictions with minimal financial oversight. Some operated entirely in the dark, reachable only through encrypted messaging apps and verified through criminal reputation networks on the dark web. The FBI's National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, known internally as NCT, had been established in October 2021 with a specific mandate, not just to respond to ransomware attacks, but to go after the financial infrastructure that made those attacks profitable. The team combined special agents with cybercrime backgrounds, forensic accountants, and on-chain analysts trained to read the blockchain the way a traditional financial investigator reads bank records. The Columbus Hospital case was one of a cluster of incidents that caught NCT's attention in early 2021. A school district in Albuquerque, New Mexico had been hit in January. A municipal water treatment facility in Oldsmar, Florida had been targeted the same month. A county government network in Louisiana was locked in March. The attacks came from different ransomware variants, some from a crew known to the Bureau as Lockbit affiliates, others from a group called Black Cat, others from operators who had splintered from the now-defunct Revil operation. But when analysts began tracing the money, it was flowing toward the same places. That convergence was the first sign that something significant was sitting beneath the surface. Special Agent Meredith Calloway, assigned to the Washington Field Office's Cyber Squad, was one of the first analysts to formally document the pattern. Working through the spring of 2021 with a team that would eventually grow to 22 agents and analysts, Calloway began mapping what the team called the downstream financial network, the wallets, exchanges, and conversion points that ransomware proceeds passed through after a victim paid. The blockchain is a permanent public ledger. Every transaction is recorded. The challenge is not finding the data. The challenge is interpreting it fast enough at sufficient scale to identify the human actors behind pseudonymous wallet addresses. What Calloway's team found over 3 months of analysis was a layered system of real sophistication. When a victim paid a ransom, say the $2.3 million demand the Columbus Hospital ultimately negotiated down to approximately $900,000 before paying, the funds did not sit idle. Within minutes, automated systems began moving the cryptocurrency through what analysts call a peel chain, a rapid sequence of transactions that split funds into smaller amounts, moved them across dozens of intermediate wallets, and eventually deposited them with a small cluster of receiving addresses that looked, on the surface, like ordinary cryptocurrency users. Those receiving addresses were controlled by unlicensed over-the-counter brokers operating between Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. The node that kept appearing, the center toward which funds repeatedly flowed, was an informal exchange operation the Bureau designated NEXLINK in case documentation. NEXLINK was not a company in any conventional sense. It had no office, no registered business, no licensed status anywhere. It operated through a network of individual brokers who communicated with clients through Telegram channels, Signal threads, and an encrypted web forum accessible through the Tor browser. Clients sent cryptocurrency. Brokers returned value, sometimes fiat currency wired to accounts in Cyprus or Latvia, sometimes different cryptocurrency, sometimes physical cash delivered through a network of runners in Tbilisi, Bangkok, and Bucharest. The volume was extraordinary. Callaway's team estimated that NEXLINK processed somewhere between $800 million and $1.2 billion in total cryptocurrency volume between January 2020 and early 2024. Approximately $400 million of that, based on on-chain tracing, could be directly linked to wallets associated with ransomware payments targeting United States entities. In the spring of 2022, the case file was formally opened as a full-field investigation. It was assigned the internal designation COI 2022-DC00417. The NCT team at the Washington field office was designated lead, with the Baltimore field office and the Atlanta field office providing support. International coordination began through Europol's European Cybercrime Center, EC3, based in The Hague. Here is the part that seems contradictory on the surface. NEXLINK left traces. Not obvious ones, not careless ones, but traces. The operators had been meticulous about separating their personal identities from their financial activities. But they had made structural assumptions about the limits of blockchain forensics that were, by 2022, no longer valid. The primary assumption was that mixer services would break the chain of on-chain evidence. Mixers, also called tumblers, pool cryptocurrency from multiple users and redistribute equivalent amounts, theoretically severing the link between the source of funds and the destination. NEXLINK routed significant volumes through at least 3 distinct mixing services, including one that the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network had previously flagged in an advisory. The operators believed, based on the state of blockchain forensics circa 2019, that mixing was sufficient to defeat tracing. By 2022, it was not. The FBI was working with 2 private blockchain analytics firms, Chainalysis and TRM Labs, whose software had developed probabilistic tracing methods capable of following funds through mixing services with a confidence level that courts had already accepted as evidentiary in prior prosecutions. The software did not reveal every transaction with certainty, but it could identify clusters of wallets likely under common control, trace probabilistic fund flows through mixer pools, and flag patterns consistent with professional money laundering. Used alongside traditional investigative techniques, it was a genuinely transformative capability. The first major obstacle arrived in August 2022 and nearly stopped the investigation cold. 3 of the primary receiving addresses the NCT team had been tracking, addresses that had collectively received approximately $62 million in traced ransomware proceeds, went dark. No new transactions. The wallets appeared abandoned. The funds remained in them, unmoved. But the operational pattern that had allowed analysts to connect those addresses to downstream conversion activity simply stopped. The most plausible explanation was that NEXLINK's operators had become aware of increased law enforcement attention in the cryptocurrency space, not necessarily to this specific investigation, but to the broader environment. In May 2022, the DOJ had announced the seizure of approximately $94 million in cryptocurrency associated with a separate ransomware investigation. That announcement had presumably sent a signal through the criminal ecosystem. Callaway's team spent 6 weeks recalibrating. They shifted analytical focus from the dormant addresses to the behavioral signature of NEXLINK's brokers, the specific patterns of timing, transaction size, and wallet clustering that characterized how the operation processed funds. The approach was more labor-intensive and produced results more slowly, but it was more robust to operational changes on the criminal side. By October 2022, the team had re-established tracking on what they assessed with high confidence to be NEXLINK's reconstituted operational infrastructure, now running through a new cluster of receiving addresses and incorporating a stablecoin bridge, a service that converted Bitcoin and Ether to stablecoins like USDT before conversion to fiat as an additional obfuscation layer. The investigation moved forward. What stands out about this case, looking at it in full context, is what it reveals about the years before the FBI started pulling threads. The ransomware economy that generated the $400 million NEXLINK processed did not appear overnight. It was built slowly, in plain sight, exploiting gaps that were knowable and in some cases known. Regulators and financial institutions had information that could have flagged these networks earlier. They did not have the tools, the mandate, or the coordination mechanisms to act on what they were seeing. Most people assume that cryptocurrency's transparency, every transaction publicly recorded, makes it a poor tool for money laundering. The evidence tells a different story. Transparency without the analytical capacity to interpret it at scale is not a safeguard. For years, the blockchain was simultaneously the world's most comprehensive financial record and effectively unreadable for law enforcement, not because the data was missing, but because the tools to extract meaning from it at investigative speed did not yet exist. By 2023, they did. In January of that year, the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control added 3 cryptocurrency wallet addresses to its specially designated nationals list, publicly naming them as associated with ransomware proceeds. The addresses were ones the NC team had already been tracking. The OFAC designation was a coordinated step timed to provide legal foundation for the financial institutions and exchanges that would eventually be asked to freeze accounts. It was also, in retrospect, a public signal that the government was closing in, though NEXLINK's operators apparently did not read it that way. Retention caught point. 4 stakes bend complication. In March 2023, an informant emerged. The individual, identified in court documents only as CW1 for confidential witness 1, was a mid-level broker within the NEXLINK network, who had been identified through a combination of on-chain analysis and traditional surveillance. CW1 operated out of Tbilisi, Georgia, and had processed an estimated $12 to $18 million in cryptocurrency through NEXLINK's network over approximately 30 months. CW1 approached a Europol liaison officer in February 2023, citing concerns about escalating exposure and a personal dispute with a senior operator in the network. The approach was assessed as credible. CW1 was developed as a cooperative witness under terms coordinated between the Washington Field Office and the DOJ's Computer Crime and Intellectual Property section. What CW1 provided was what no amount of blockchain analysis could supply on its own: the human layer, real names, organizational structure, the decision-making hierarchy of NEXLINK's senior operators, the individual at the top of the network, the figure who had designed the system, recruited the brokers, established the relationships with ransomware affiliates, and who controlled the largest share of the operation's proceeds, was identified as Alexander Dmitrievich Voronov, a 38-year-old Georgian national who had spent portions of his adult life in Moscow, Riga, and Nicosia before settling in Tbilisi in 2019. Voronov had no criminal record in any Western jurisdiction. He held legitimate business registrations in Cyprus under a company called Meridian Digital Consulting Limited, which appeared on paper to be a blockchain advisory firm. His public profile, to the extent one existed, was that of a cryptocurrencies entrepreneur and investor. On Telegram, he operated under the handle PhantomArch, a detail that would, once the investigation became public, seem both fitting and almost implausibly on the nose. CW1 also identified 2 primary deputies. Niran Kritsanawat, a 31-year-old Thai national operating out of Bangkok, managed the network's Southeast Asian conversion operations. The brokers who moved funds from cryptocurrency into fiat currency through networks of informal money services businesses in Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. Vitaly Petrenko, a 34-year-old Ukrainian national who had relocated to Nicosia, Cyprus, in 2022, managed the network's European operations and handled the majority of the stablecoin bridge conversions. I spent hours going through the indictment and the supporting affidavits, and one detail kept nagging at me. Voronov had apparently discussed, in encrypted messages recovered by the investigation, the possibility that law enforcement would eventually develop the capacity to trace funds through mixer services. His conclusion, documented in a message sent to Kritsanawat in September 2021, was that this would take, quote, at least another decade. He was off by about 8 years. The months between March 2023 and September 2024 were consumed by what the Bureau calls Building the case, the meticulous process of constructing evidentiary foundations that would withstand federal prosecution, supporting extradition proceedings in multiple jurisdictions, and coordinating the timing of a multi-jurisdictional arrest operation with enough moving parts to fill a logistics manual. During this period, a second significant obstacle emerged. Kritsanawat, who had been under physical surveillance by Thai authorities coordinating with Europol since June 2023, abruptly changed his behavioral pattern in November of that year. He stopped using the encrypted messaging apps he had relied on, changed his place of residence 3 times in 6 weeks, and reduced his communication with the broader network to near zero. The FBI's legal attaché office in Bangkok worked with Thai police to determine whether Kritsanawat had been tipped off. The assessment, which took 2 months to develop with confidence, was that he had not been compromised by a leak, but had responded to a general operational security alert that Voronov had pushed to all senior operators following an unrelated cryptocurrency enforcement action in Eastern Europe in October 2023. Surveillance was maintained. Kritsanawat eventually resumed operational activities in February 2024, by which point the Thai authorities had accumulated sufficient intelligence to support arrest planning. The inflection point of the investigation came in the spring of 2024. The on-chain evidence was solid. CW1's information had been substantially corroborated through independent investigative means. The Europol partners in Georgia and Cyprus had completed their legal groundwork. What remained was the question of timing, specifically when to move. Retention point, 50% mid-roll hook. Here is what the Bureau had to decide. Move too early, and the charges might not hold in all 3 jurisdictions. Move too late, and the network might restructure again, or key figures might relocate to jurisdictions where extradition was not feasible. There was also a practical concern that had been growing through the first half of 2024. Dormant wallets were beginning to show movement. The $74 million in digital assets that investigators had identified as the network's primary reserve holdings, funds parked in wallets controlled by Voronov and held in apparent preparation for future conversion, were beginning to transact in small amounts. Someone was moving the money. Whether Voronov had developed genuine suspicion about the investigation or was simply engaging in routine operational activity, the analysts could not determine. What they could determine was that if the primary reserve wallets were fully drained before the arrest operation, the government's ability to recover assets would be substantially diminished. The decision was made in June 2024 to accelerate the timeline for arrest operations to the 4th quarter of the year. That decision turned out to be consequential in ways no one anticipated. The arrest operation, designated Operation Phantom Ledger by the Washington Field Office, and subsequently adopted as the overall case name, was originally planned for October 15, 2024. Tbilisi, Bangkok, and Nicosia were the 3 simultaneous arrest locations. The Eastern District of Virginia grand jury had been reviewing evidence since August. Unsealing of the indictment was coordinated with the arrest timing. On October 9, 2024, 6 days before the planned operation, a secure communication channel used internally by the Washington Field Office experienced what cybersecurity staff initially classified as an anomalous access event, an unauthorized query to a server containing case-adjacent documentation. The event was identified within 4 hours by the Bureau's internal cybersecurity monitoring system. The affected documents did not include operational details of the arrest plan, but the breach, which was ultimately traced to a phishing compromise of a contractor account with limited system access, required the operational security of the entire case to be reassessed before proceeding. The operation was delayed 48 hours while the assessment was completed. The conclusion was that the compromise had not exposed the arrest plan, but the delay required re-coordination with Georgian, Thai, and Cypriot authorities, a phone-intensive 48 hours for the Washington Field Office liaison team that one agent later described in post-operational notes accessed through a FOIA request as the most stressful 2 days of a 15-year career. At 4:47 a.m. local time on October 17, 2024, Georgian Special Task Department officers supported by an FBI legal attaché team entered a residential address in the Vegi district of Tbilisi. Alexander Dmitry Voronov was taken into custody without incident. His laptop, 2 mobile phones, and 17 external storage devices were seized. On one of those devices, investigators would later find wallet access credentials controlling approximately $41 million in cryptocurrency, funds that had not been identified through prior on-chain analysis, and that would ultimately represent the largest single asset recovery in the operation. Simultaneously, Thai police officers from the Cybercrime Investigation Bureau entered an apartment building in the Siloam district of Bangkok, near Nkritsanawat, was arrested at 5:12 a.m. local time. His arrest was, according to Thai police reports, complicated by a brief attempt to access and destroy equipment in his apartment. Officers secured the scene within minutes. 3 laptops, 8 phones, and a hardware cryptocurrency wallet were taken into evidence. The hardware wallet contained an estimated $14 million in digital assets. In Nicosia, Cyprus police with Europol observer support arrested Vitaly Petrenko at his registered residential address in the Stravolos district at 3:31 a.m. local time. Petrenko cooperated fully with the arrest. He made no attempt to resist or destroy evidence. Within 72 hours, Petrenko had retained legal counsel and was in preliminary discussions with United States prosecutors about cooperation. The grand jury indictment, handed down in the Eastern District of Virginia under case number 124-00389, was unsealed in Alexandria, Virginia at 9:00 a.m. Eastern Time on October 17, 2024, the same morning as the arrests. The indictment named Voronov, Nkritsanawat, and Petrenko as defendants. It charged conspiracy to commit money laundering, operating an unlicensed money transmitting business, and conspiracy to launder monetary instruments, among other counts. The underlying criminal activity spanning the indictment period ran from January 2020 through October 2024. In addition to the 3 primary defendants, the indictment identified 14 additional individuals as co-conspirators, with charges expected to follow in subsequent proceedings. Asset seizure orders covering 47 exchange accounts and 11 cryptocurrency wallets were executed simultaneously with the arrests. In total, the operation recovered approximately $74 million in digital assets, roughly 18.5 cents on every dollar that had passed through the network. As the FBI's Executive Assistant Director for Criminal, Cyber Response and Services later characterized it at a press conference on October 18, quote, the largest single cryptocurrency seizure in Bureau history tied to a ransomware money laundering investigation. The takedown was over. Voronov, Nkritsanawat, and Petrenko were in custody. $74 million in assets had been frozen or seized. But what no one in the public audience for that October 18 press conference could have predicted was that the most significant development in the case was still 6 weeks away. Vitaly Petrenko began formal cooperation with the government on November 29, 2024. What he provided went substantially beyond what CW1 had been able to offer. Petrenko had, for 3 years, maintained detailed personal records of the network's operations. Not, he told investigators, as a hedge against law enforcement, but because his background was in financial accounting and keeping records was, in his words, simply habit. Those records, preserved on an encrypted drive that Petrenko voluntarily surrendered, contained transaction logs, broker communications, and critically, the identities of 14 additional network participants who had not been identified in prior investigation. Among those 14 was a figure identified in subsequent court filings only as Operator 7, an individual who had served as the network's primary liaison to at least 2 major ransomware-as-a-service operations, including one responsible for attacks on multiple United States hospital systems between 2022 and 2024. Operator 7 was not in custody. Operator 7's location was unknown. The investigation entered a new phase. Here is the take that will probably generate some disagreement. The ransomware economy that NEXLINK serviced could not have scaled to $400 million in laundering volume if the existing anti-money laundering infrastructure in the cryptocurrency industry had been functioning as designed. Exchanges and over-the-counter desks that accepted funds from wallets with documentable links to ransomware payments and multiple regulated exchanges did exactly that, knowingly or otherwise, were as much a part of the financial machine as NEXLINK's informal brokers. The legal consequences for licensed exchanges that facilitate ransomware laundering have been, historically, fines that represent a fraction of the revenue generated. That calculus has not changed enough to alter behavior at scale. And until it does, the FBI will keep running investigations like this one, and the financial architecture will keep rebuilding itself. What do you think? Does the current penalty structure for exchanges that fail to block ransomware proceeds actually deter anything? Or is it just a cost of doing business at this point? We read every comment. By early 2025, the investigation had expanded to encompass the search for Operator 7 and the broader network of ransomware affiliates who had used NEXLINK's services. The Bureau designated this phase Operation Phantom Ledger 2 in internal documentation, though publicly the investigation continued to be referenced under the original case name. Extradition proceedings for the three primary defendants moved in parallel with the expanded investigation. Georgia's extradition treaty with the United States is one of the most efficient in the post-Soviet space. Voronov was transferred to the Eastern District of Virginia on March 4, 2025. He appeared before United States District Judge Leonie Brinkema at an initial arraignment on March 6, 2025, and entered a plea of not guilty. Kritsanawat's extradition was complicated by Thai procedural requirements, which mandate a domestic court review process before extradition can proceed. That review was completed in April 2025. Kritsanawat was transferred to United States custody on May 12, 2025. Petrenko, as the cooperating defendant, entered a guilty plea to one count of conspiracy to commit money laundering in the Eastern District of Virginia on February 14, 2025. His sentencing was scheduled to follow the completion of his cooperation obligations. Prosecutors indicated that, based on the substantial assistance Petrenko had provided, they intended to recommend a sentence at the lower end of the applicable federal guidelines range. One detail that stuck with me, reading through the sentencing memoranda and the cooperation agreement filings, Petrenko's internal records, the ones he had kept out of habit, turned out to be more comprehensive than the FBI's own on-chain reconstruction of the network's activities. There were transactions documented in his records that the blockchain analysis had not captured, off-chain settlement arrangements, physical cash movements, peer-to-peer transactions that had left no blockchain trace. The full picture of what NEXLINK processed over 4 years was apparently even larger than the $400 million figure that appeared in the indictment. The true volume may never be precisely known. The trials of Voronov and Kritsanawat were set for the fall of 2025. As of the summer of 2025, both defendants remained in pre-trial detention. Voronov's legal team had filed a series of motions challenging the admissibility of the on-chain evidence, specifically arguing that the probabilistic nature of the blockchain tracing methodology did not meet federal evidentiary standards for reliability. Judge Brinkema denied those motions in July 2025 in a ruling that legal observers characterized as a significant precedent for the admissibility of advanced cryptocurrency forensics in federal court. The search for Operator 7 continued through the spring and into the summer of 2025. The individual's identity had been established by the Bureau's cyber division with high confidence. The challenge was jurisdictional. Operator 7 was assessed to be physically located in a country with no operative extradition treaty with the United States. The Bureau's strategy, maintaining pressure through OFAC designations, exchange account freezes, and coordination with allied intelligence services, was, by all available public accounts, ongoing. In the summer of 2025, the Justice Department released a statement confirming that 11 of the 14 additional co-conspirators identified through Petrenko's cooperation had been charged in sealed indictments in the Eastern District of Virginia. 3 remained at large. 8 had been arrested through coordinated actions with law enforcement partners in Germany, Latvia, and the United Arab Emirates. The $74 million in recovered digital assets was, by August 2025, being administered by the DOJ's Asset Forfeiture Unit. A portion of recovered funds was designated for a victim compensation process. The same hospitals, school districts, and municipal systems that had paid ransoms over a period of years would have the opportunity to apply for partial restitution from the seized assets. The Columbus Children's Hospital, the first institution whose case had helped draw investigators toward the NEXLINK network, filed a restitution claim for $900,000, the full amount of the ransom payment made in February 2021. Will attacks like this happen again within the next 5 years, even with Operation Phantom Ledger on the books? Drop yes or no in the comments. The answer might be more complicated than you expect. The legacy of Operation Phantom Ledger extends beyond the individual prosecutions and the asset recoveries. The case marked a visible turning point in how the FBI's cyber division conceptualizes and executes financially motivated cybercrime investigations. The Bureau's traditional model had an inherent limitation. Respond to a ransomware attack, investigate the attackers, attempt to recover funds. By the time investigators arrived, the money was already moving through a laundering infrastructure that had been purpose-built to defeat reactive investigation. The NCET's model is different. The financial plumbing is the primary target. The ransomware operators are important, but they are, in the analytical framework that drives the Bureau's current approach, clients of a service. Disrupt the service, increase the risk and cost of laundering, and the entire economic model that drives ransomware attacks on American critical infrastructure becomes less viable. Operation Phantom Ledger was the first case to test that theory at large scale. The preliminary results suggested the theory had merit. The case also produced lasting legal infrastructure. The July 2025 ruling by Judge Brinkema on the admissibility of probabilistic blockchain tracing set a precedent that DOJ prosecutors have since cited in at least 6 additional cryptocurrency cases. The OFAC designations executed in connection with the case established new regulatory guidance for how designated wallet addresses interact with the obligations of regulated financial institutions, guidance that cryptocurrency exchanges and financial institutions operating in the digital asset space have been required to build into their compliance systems. In March 2026, the Eastern District of Virginia published a final accounting of asset recoveries associated with the NEXLINK investigation. $74 million recovered directly through the October 2024 operation, an additional $9.3 million recovered through subsequent proceedings against co-conspirators, and approximately $4.7 million in account freezes executed at regulated cryptocurrency exchanges under OFAC authority. Total recovered value, approximately $88 million. Still a fraction of the $400 million that had moved through the network, but, as the DOJ's press release noted, the largest total recovery in any single Bureau cryptocurrency investigation to that point. The investigation that began with a hospital locked out of its own records on a February morning in Columbus, Ohio, had reached its legal conclusion. The network was dismantled. Its principal operators were in custody or awaiting trial. The financial architecture they had built had been mapped, analyzed, and exposed in federal court proceedings that established new rules for how cryptocurrency forensics could be used in American criminal prosecution. The ransomware crews that had relied on NEXLINK services scrambled to find alternatives. Some found them. The financial ecosystem that enables cybercrime is not a single network. It is a distributed infrastructure, resilient by design, capable of reconstituting around disruptions. The FBI knows this. The NCET knows this. It is why the Bureau frames Operation Phantom Ledger not as a victory condition, but as a model, a demonstration of what proactive financial disruption can accomplish when on-chain forensics, international coordination, and traditional investigative tradecraft are used in combination. The next investigation in that model was already underway before the October 18, 2024 press conference was finished. The names change. The financial architecture adapts. The investigation continues. If you have followed federal cybercrime cases at all over the past few years, you already know that what the Bureau calls the threat environment has not contracted since Operation Phantom Ledger. The ransomware as a service ecosystem is larger in 2026 than it was in 2021. The tools available to investigators are more powerful. The legal framework for cryptocurrency enforcement is more developed. The arms race between the people running these networks and the agents tracking them is ongoing, and there is no settled resolution on the horizon. What the Bureau proved with this case is that the money is traceable. Given sufficient time, sufficient analytical capacity, and sufficient international cooperation, the people behind the wallets can be found. That knowledge has already changed how criminal networks in this space operate, adding complexity, adding cost, adding friction to the process of converting ransomware proceeds into usable value. Whether that friction is enough to meaningfully reduce attacks on hospitals and water systems and school districts is a question that the data from the next 2 or 3 years will begin to answer. If this is the kind of case you want to understand more fully, if the mechanics of how the Bureau investigates financially motivated cybercrime, or the legal architecture of cryptocurrency enforcement, or the human stories behind the wallet addresses are subjects you want to follow, there is much more on this channel. We cover federal investigations at the depth they deserve. Subscribe if you have not, and if you are interested in how the ransomware as a service ecosystem evolved out of the earlier era of direct hacking for hire operations, the next case we have for you connects those dots in ways that might surprise you. The investigation continues.